Good morning, everybody. I'm Jay Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the April 8th, 2020 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details as we continue to walk through Holy Week and what Jesus did on each day of that important week. Today, of course, is Wednesday of Holy Week, so we're going to pick up and see what was he up to on that day. Now, he was up to teaching in the temple, and so everything really, it appears from chapter 22 of Matthew going all the way forward until what would it be, the 26 verse 17 would have been what he was teaching. You have a similar recitation of lessons in Mark, going all the way from chapter 12, all the way through to through chapter 14, verse 12. So if you want to sit sometime today and read those passages, that would probably be the very best way that you could spend this Wednesday of Holy Week. There are two main points I want to make about what Jesus did on this Wednesday of Holy Week. Why do I know that this was done on Wednesday? Well, because in both Matthew and Mark, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, you know that it's 2 days until Passover. And the way the Jewish people at that time counted days was the day that you were in was one, and then any part, if you were in one day, no matter if it was the beginning or the end of the day, that was considered one day. And then another day would be, of course, 2 days. And the Jewish time started at sundown and went from sundown to sundown. So if Jesus is saying there are 2 days until Passover would have been what we call Good Friday. It would have started on sundown on Thursday night and ran to sundown of Friday. Then clearly he's speaking on Wednesday. And it is saying that his statement of this comes at the end of a bunch of this teaching. So he is teaching in the temple. Now, what exactly is he saying? Well, he's doing a lot of talking, I'm telling you. And he is speaking directly to the Jewish leaders in all of this. Now, there are other people there too, and they are taking it in, believe you me. But you remember that yesterday we talked about that he was speaking in parables to the Jewish leaders, and they were getting it, they were understanding. Well, he continued that, and then it got more and more to where finally he just let him have it. It was no more hidden at all. There was he did in what is called in Matthew the 7 woes to the Pharisees. But just to give you an idea, so you remember that in Matthew chapter 21, we talked about how he had given them the parable of the tenants, remember? And how they had rejected all of the servants that had come, meaning the prophets. And finally, they had even were going to kill the son of the master. That would be him. Well, starting in 22, he tells another parable very similar about a wedding feast given by a father for his son. And many servants are sent to bring the wedding guests in, and they will not have it. So finally, the king has people, just brings them in from the highways and the byways, the quote sinners that the Pharisees and the Sadducees thought they were above. And then the other people are not allowed to come in. So their place has been usurped because they refused the invitation. They tried to trick Jesus several times. We have the paying the taxes to Caesar issue. We have the issue about the resurrection. And the point of these questions was to trap him, but Jesus turned it around because it was right in front of all the people. And he used it to show how they didn't know what they were talking about, to show how they did not know. They were not good guides. They were not good teachers. And that's going to come back. He's going to make that very, very clear. They asked him what the greatest commandment was, and he told them. And then they asked about, he turned it around, and he asked them, who is the Christ? And they told him, the son of David. And then he pointed out that in Psalms, David calls this Messiah his Lord. And he said, how come you got a father calling a son Lord? And they couldn't answer that. Of course, we know that David could do that because although Jesus was physically, through Mary, of his bloodline, he was also God, and so calling the Lord is appropriate. Well, all of this brings us to chapter 23, which is where Jesus just says it straight out. And I just want to read this to you because this still has applicability to us today. That if you are claiming to know the Lord, you better be getting it right. You better be not that you're perfect, but that you really are trying to follow the Lord. You're open to His Spirit, because I tell you, when you're not, there's some woes here to you. And so in chapter 23, then Jesus said to the crowds and to His disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works that they do. For they preach, but they don't practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long, and they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogue and greetings in the marketplace and being called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher and you are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. And the greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a child of hell as you are yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say," and then he talks about swearing and how ridiculous it is, all this. And then he goes on and he talks about, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. You ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you clean out the inside of a cup and plate, but the inside you're full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, and the outside may also be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you're like whitewashed tombs, outwardly beautiful, but full of dead people's bones and all uncleanliness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. And then woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build tombs to the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, oh, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have participated in the shedding the blood of the prophets. But thus you witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Sounds like John the Baptist, doesn't it? Using almost the same words. Therefore I send you prophets. I send you. Who sent? Jesus saying I. He's clearly identifying as God. I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, who you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. And thus I say to you, these things come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. This is pretty bad, because Matthew 24, the very next verse says Jesus left the temple, and that appears to be that it may have been the last time that he was in the temple, was with those ending words. The Shekinah glory had left the temple once again. It's a very sad and sobering moment there, because the Jewish leaders had completely failed in their duty and their mission to bring light and an understanding of God to the people of the world. And Jesus pretty much just laid it out right there. But the good news is that in the parables, there were still wedding guests. And those were the people that maybe had not thought that they were worthy. They were not as educated. They were not as wealthy. They were not as socially sophisticated. And yet they were going to be the ones that were going to be invited in and would accept the invitation of the Lord. So while it's a scary thing, it's a warning to all of us, it's also a glorious invitation for us as well, that when you come with the right spirit, you are welcomed in the Lord's house, and that Jesus gives us plenty of opportunities to change our minds, plenty of opportunities to see the light, as you say, and he's happy about that. All of the parables clearly make that distinction. Now, the other thing that I want to speak on very quickly is what happened apparently that evening. That evening is, let me see where this is. He also, by the way, as he went out, he's still teaching, and he's teaching now his own disciples and those following him, who probably were more than just the 12, probably a lot more than just the 12. And he talks about getting ready. He has the parable of the 10 virgins. He talks about the final judgment, talking about that the Son of Man will come into his kingdom, and there will be glories. But now I want to turn to in Matthew 26:6. This is absolutely fascinating. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask with a very expensive ointment in it, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." By the way, in the complementary passage in Luke, we are told that ointment could have been sold for 300 denarii. Keep that in mind. Jesus, aware of this, in other words, he could read their minds, said to them, "Why do you trouble this woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. This is absolutely fascinating. You know, I always tell you, when you read a passage of scripture, read before and after, because there's usually a link, and that link really will explain what is the main reason for this. Why are you being told this? Here's what's very important here. We have a woman who is breaking open an alabaster jar for perfume. Now, the way this was done, it wasn't like a screw cap. You had to break it open. So once you broke this open, it was done, okay? And it was very expensive. As Luke tells us, it was the equivalent of 300 days of work. Okay, so it was the salary for a common worker, a regular worker, for 300 days. And then right at that very same, almost that same instant, Judas goes out and he makes a deal to sell God, literally to sell God for 30 pieces of silver, which was the equivalent of approximately 4 months. Okay, the commentaries say anywhere between a month to 4 months of work. Do you see the comparison here? A woman, that was probably her dowry. That might have been what was left to her from a dead father. It could have been her dowry for a future life. Whatever it was, it is clear that that must have been her savings, her life savings. And what did she do? She generously, without even thinking about it, she gave it to in a heartbeat, in a moment. For how long do you think it took to anoint him? I mean, maybe 5 minutes at most. And she spent all that money on that because she loved and honored the Lord. And then we have Judas, who is going to sell him out for less than a quarter of that. It's amazing. And yes, Jesus is absolutely right. What she did should be honored, because this is what true love does. True love doesn't count the cost. When you love somebody, isn't it true? You do whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. You don't say, well, now how much is this going to cost me? Well, how much do you really need? Well, how much? You don't do that. You just, you give, you go, you help, you sacrifice, you take risks, whatever it is. You don't keep account. You don't even keep this is true love, and this is what God wants from us. When he says, you have to sell all you have, in the sense of you come to me and you don't count the cost. Well, you count it first, and you know that you're going to give everything. But then it's just like, why? It's because of how greatly you love. And we understand that with our families and our friends. And the Lord is saying, this is what she did. It's a beautiful thing, and it's also it was also a reference, by the way, back to Psalm. This was another prophecy that was fulfilled, that the Messiah would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. So one more time, we have yet another prophecy being fulfilled. And that, my friends, is what Jesus did on Wednesday of Holy Week. I'm J. Lenore Bressler. Visit me tomorrow for the next edition of The Bible Delight in the Details. Hope you're having a great Holy Week.